All right, Kurt, go ahead.
Okay. We're calling the meeting to order. This is the fund meeting for January 2024. Dr. Kobe, has there been any communications to the council?
No, there has not.
Okay. So maybe we'll give a minute or so to anyone that wants to make any comment or communicate anything to the council. Dr. Kobe, how would they communicate? Would they just go on the chat?
Yes, they just go into the chat and they can ask questions and we're monitoring those. I don't see anything.
Okay, we've received no communications or requests to communicate with the council. Okay, given that, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. This is the approval of the minutes from November 1st, which is a personal income meeting. Any motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to improve.
Second.
So there's a motion to approve the minutes and a second. Any discussion before we take a vote? Okay, no. Okay, okay, we'll take a vote on the approval of the minutes from November 1st. Vice Chair Maynard?
Aye.
Dr. Bonham?
Abstain. I don't think I was at that meeting.
Okay.
You were not.
You're lost.
Okay. Councilmember Hayashi?
Yes.
Councilmember Lee?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Councilmember Osegar Clem?
Aye.
Okay, and then Councilmember, trying to see, Hamasu?
Aye.
Okay, so the minutes are approved by unanimously 6-0. Okay. The next item on the agenda is review of revenues by the Department of Tax. So Dr. Kobe, do you have some tentative numbers for December?
Yeah, let me share my screen and presentation. And we'll go from there. Okay, you can see that all right?
Yes.
Yes, now
Okay,
better.
great. Okay, so these are the numbers for up until December, right? So officially the preliminary comparative statement comes out on tomorrow, but this is a little sneak preview. So, but we don't really think the numbers are going to diverge that much. So I want to clue you in on a couple things or point to a couple things. One is the GET is at 1.2%. So it's a little lower than we were expecting, but I'm going to go over that and potential reasons why that is the case. The other thing is the individual income tax is very much up. And that is due primarily to the constitutional refund that occurred in the previous fiscal year, and that was $311 million, right? So if you take out this $311 million, we would be actually slightly down on the year for the individual income tax. Most of that is through the estimated taxes. And I'm going to talk about the declared estimated taxes in a little bit, right? So that's one of the question marks. But for the withholding tax, it's actually up on the year, right? And so this is the big if. Now, and transient accommodation tax is a little bit down, 6.1%. And so overall, the general fund for the half of the year is 7.3%. Right. And so you guys are going to have to decide what is the current trajectory and how is that going to accommodate or incorporate with the 7.3.
And if you could remind us the size of the refund that was given last year.
$311 million.
So if you subtract that out, we are actually down a bit on the year. Is that correct?
On the individual income tax,
I mean, the
not.
total general fund, we're up 380.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit. That's correct.
Thank you.
So one thing I just wanted to point out is in the last discussion, we were talking about the GET, and it was slightly negative in the month of August. So what's happening here? I've dug into this extensively, and there's nothing really direct, but what I really think is because of the Maui wild fires, they waived the P&L on taxpayers for people paying in Maui, and people affected by the Maui wildfires. So what I like
P&I, right? P&I.
P&I, sorry, P&I. And that's penalty and interest. So basically what it looks like is a lot of people just didn't pay the GET, and that's what caused it. And that was a one-off event. And then it's been slightly over for the past couple, the subsequent months and the months before. So that's just something to think about, like what is really driven down the GET collections is probably that aberrant month of August. And I don't expect that to happen again, but it could, right? As far as like the individual income tax, right? So one of the big questions, there's two big things, was what's going to happen with estimated taxes going forward and what's going to happen in April. So I wanted to show you where we are. This is only individual income tax collections and where we are on the year. So far we're up, and the reason we're up primarily is at least for September and October, is the is the constitutional refund. Here we are in November. I'm sorry, I don't know why I didn't include this, but it would be right around here for December. So it is slightly higher for this month compared to last month, or the same December of 2022. But there's a couple of things I just wanted to point out. One is our individual income tax in 2023 was already lower compared to 2022, right? And so we're not really expecting anything to be matched the fiscal year 2022 year, because that was when we saw everything growing bananas. So one of the things that you guys have to decide is where you expect the estimated taxes to be, particularly in terms of April, relative to fiscal 2023, which had already come down, right? Will it come down even more? Will it be slightly higher? That is all dependent on you. I do think there are, the one thing that I am expecting is, because this is the end of every year, you calculate your estimated taxes, right? And so last year you were calculating your estimated taxes compared to the year before, which was fiscal year 2022, which was the bumper year, right? So all of our estimated taxes are down. This year you're comparing, so again, everybody's going to figure out their estimated taxes for the coming year, and they're going to compare it to 2023. There hasn't been huge market changes in 2023, or 2024 as compared to 2023, as there were between 2023 and 2022, right? So my best guess is the estimated taxes, which has been low for the preceding 6 months of the first 6 months of the fiscal year, will not be as negative as they are for the subsequent 6 months, right? How much that is, in that case, you guys can decide for yourself, but those are my expectations. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so, and this is just kind of a reminder of the major things driving revenues, at least for fiscal year 2024. We had the 311 million constitutional refund in 2022. The lower estimated tax payments will reset in 2024. You have to consider the economic impacts of the Maui wildfires, and what's going to happen in terms of the economy of the national and state level. And then the other thing that to keep in mind is of the tax law changes, there was 83 million. So that's slightly less than 1% growth. That is, we expect all of that to accumulate this in the second half of the fiscal year, because they're primarily refunds and they're going to be refunded out, right? So the negative 83 million has probably not hit or been registered in terms of our revenues, but they will begin in the second half of this fiscal year. This is a reminder of where you guys are right now. So we're at 7.5% in terms of for the first 6 months of growth, and you are currently projecting 1.3% by year end, right? That would require, I'm pretty sure that will require negative growth to hit that in the next subsequent 6 months. But I encourage you guys to use the calculator that I sent you to figure that out. And then it's 5.2 and 3.5 going forward. The model that you guys sent in was 3.6% for the first year, 2024, and 7.7 in 2025, 6.4 in 2026, and so on. And then, so this is built based on the general model with your economic forecasts. Economic forecast.
If I could, Seth, sorry, that takes into account the 311 million.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
So this is us doing the math for you guys.
Thank
Right.
you.
Yeah. So if the 300 million, I would this would be like something, I think it would like 0.8, right, or 1.9, and then this would be probably closer to 0, right? If there was no anything there. Yeah, and this is just number one of these kind of rubrics that shows you, like, given your, to help you decide. So what you guys think is your total personal income, if you think it's going to be, let's say you think it's going to be 3% this year, and you think that visitor arrivals are flat, this is what you would expect giving for general fund growth. You would expect 3.6%. Right, so you guys can make those adjustments. Again, the one caveat in here is we did not include construction spending. And construction spending, I'm sure Carl will talk about that, is growing a lot, and that is a driver, a primary driver of our economic model that I have kept static here for the purpose of this model. So if you change that, that would change all the parameters as well. So with that, I will end there, unless you guys have any specific questions for me.
Could you send that report to us? Yeah, I know it was included in the packet, but I think one of the graphs only had a couple years on it as
Oh,
opposed.
this one? Yeah, I added a couple more years.
Yeah, that's
for this one.
helpful, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I will.
So it doesn't, 2024 gets truncated, but
Yeah. I will send it to you. So that's the other thing is, like, something happened in 2019, like our Aprils were not that big, right? And after the COVID, all of our Aprils have come in, they're much bigger spikes than before.
yeah.
Which is an interesting dynamic.
Seth?
Can you show us the draft December statement again? Oh,
Seth, can I ask a question with regard to this?
Yes.
So the GE tax amount, does that include the county surcharge, or is it just the 4%?
It's just the 4%. So
Okay.
this is only general fund revenues.
Okay. So the impact of the Maui increase in the surcharge has no impact on any of this.
No impact.
Okay.
The only impact that it would have is if you think people are spending less because of the 0.5%.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
So do you have a sense if how much the wage level went up for people? Set.
If I had to guess for the wages, at least for people who have paychecks, monthly paychecks and W-2s, I would have to divide 1.35 divided by 1.25. I can come up with that one right now.
It's about 7%, or is it?
But what is the question?
How much did wage level
7.4.
go up for people?
Oh, you want to know how much total wages went up?
Yeah, in general. Do we have a sense for that?
Or do you want to know how much withholding taxes on wages went up?
No, withholding, we have the withholding taxes here, but the wage level.
Oh, you have 1 month and then the fiscal year comparison. I thought
Yeah.
you were asking about the December over December.
No, just the general wage level. How much
I mean,
did
the rate hasn't changed. Right. I
Not the
mean,
wage, not the, I'm not asking the rate. I'm asking,
Yeah.
how much did the gross wage level go up for people generally? No way.
Well, if you look on table 4,
Yeah.
there's total personal income, which is, and that's backwards looking. That's not what you, so for fiscal year 2023, it was 5%. And then for the first quarter of fiscal year 2024, it is 5.6%.
So this is both public and private sector going up.
Yes. This is total personal income, which,
so it's more than just labor
yeah,
income.
exactly. It's transfers, it's everything.
So in the declaration of estimated tax, isn't that a large component of it also the profits from businesses? Self-employed partnerships, S
Yeah,
corps.
that's where it would come through. Yes, correct.
Yeah. Because I
There's
think
just,
when you have sales of stock or real estate, a lot of times you don't have to pay it until April. You know, assuming you had in, you can rely on an exception, you paid in sufficient amount for the year.
right. So like, that's one of the big questions, you know, the stock market, it did end high on the year, right? So what is that going to do? That would probably increase the tax payments that I would expect in April because they were higher, right?
I was thinking
So
April,
those are just questions that you guys have to discuss and answer for yourselves.
this is some indication of profitability is declining for business.
From fiscal year 2020, it really is for between calendar year 2023 to calendar year 2022. Right? Because that's how people file their estimated taxes.
Well, they pay for the current year, right? So they pay the first quarter of 23 for the first quarter, second quarter in 23 in June, third quarter in September. And a lot of times if their profits are less, they won't pay, they'll pay in based on actual if they do it.
so if you know, we talked about this before, but one of the areas where we know right, revenues have declined for businesses is anybody associated with real estate, whether it's agents or all of the ancillary services. I mean, appraisals, and the volume of activity is down where it was in 2008, 2009, right, in terms of sales. And so, I mean, that's a huge hit to revenue income for agents, for appraisers, for inspectors, for you know, all kinds of activity. And but that's over. I mean, we're not going to fall another 30 or 40% this year. In fact, we're likely to see some small improvement as rates come down. That's a little bit more of next fiscal year, I suspect. But
how about the rest of the business community? Or do we have a sense if their profitability is declining?
Do you just want to, are you guys going to move on to the discussion of?
I just had that last question about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that for me or is that for Carl?
Anyone that thinks they can answer it.
Carl, you go ahead.
I mean, it makes some sense that profitability would be down. I mean, businesses are being impacted by rising costs, just like households are, right? Inflation affects businesses. I mean, the good news is we're mostly past that as well. Doesn't mean prices are falling, but I think it would make some sense.
Yeah.
And then you've got you've got
I
the evidence on
it's too,
on
right?
the excise tax, that the excise tax is flat. And so, that's telling us that revenue is probably pretty flat, but costs are up.
Yeah. And their financing cost is up too.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody with any kind of revolving debt is getting hit.
Okay, thank you.
If we, Seth, can we go back to the monthly income tax collections chart?
We're,
Yeah, so that's so the 2019 number. So I was looking at this when I was preparing my forecast and trying to decide what to assume about the second quarter of the fiscal year, or not the second quarter of the fiscal year, but the second quarter of the calendar of 2024. And if you go back farther, it's interesting. I mean, it's true what Seth said, that there was a change with the pandemic, and the average. So I did this a couple different ways. I looked at the share of general fund. So this was actually, am I looking at general fund, or am I looking at, let me double check what the calculation was. Yeah, this was general fund revenue. This wasn't specifically income tax, but it's all being driven by income tax. And I can redo the calculations for income tax if we want to. But the share of general fund that was coming from April for the whole fiscal year used to average about 9%. So the whole fiscal year, about 9% of the general fund revenue showed up in April. And if you just looked at the first half of the fiscal year, because that's the data we have so far, it was 19%. So that was from 2010 to 2019. And then in 2021, 2022, 2023, the numbers shot up, right? And the share was closer to 14 to 15%, roughly 14%, I think, if I averaged. And the share of the first half of the year went from 19% to almost 30%. But having said that, if you go back and look at the individual years, so 2018 was a big year. 2019 was actually 2019 was below average, but 2010, 2011, 2018 all had a share of total tax revenues that came in April over 10%. And that, to me, that's the real question for this fiscal year, is what's going to happen in April. And we've got some positives, which are gains in the stock market are likely going to be showing up in returns this year. We have what I would suggest is probably the end of that drag from the mostly from real estate. But what I did was I basically made an assumption that we weren't going back to normal. We weren't going to go all the way back down to the 2010, 2019 average share of revenues, but I kind of split the difference and assumed that we would get growth somewhere between. So if you were just looking at this graph, you could say somewhere in between, say, 2019 and 2021 levels of income tax collections. I'm done.
So Carl, you're not going to tell us why that is?
You mean what the result was?
No. What you're speculating why that's happening?
Oh, I don't really. I don't have an answer. I don't even have a speculation for why it's happening. I mean, other than, basically everything's crazy.
That's a good, yeah, it depends, right? That's always a good statement. Okay, good. No, that's really interesting though.
Yeah, and actually this year's April will be very interesting from a right. If we do end up going more towards historical numbers, or if we get another big year, that'll be really, still won't tell us why. You think about all the things that have changed, right? All of the from the tax refunds to the federal spending to the the transfer payments to the swings in business activity with tourism, with the pandemic. I don't have there's a lot of noise in there.
But
So
Carl, one of the things I think you are saying is a larger percent of our income is coming from non-wage income, and that makes it all come down to estimated taxes, and it's a little harder to judge.
Yeah, good point.
Generally estimated taxes, you file safe harbor, meaning that if you expect your income or tax to go up, you're going to put in 100% of the previous year, and then you make up the difference come April. So either everybody's underestimating their income for the last 3 years, or I guess, have underpayment penalties gone up? And if underpayment penalties have gone up, that means folks are saying, hey, I'm holding on to my tax. I don't really know what my 1099s will look like come January, February, or they're just taking the chance that maybe their income is less, and then they realize come April 15th that it's higher, and therefore they're paying these underpayment penalties. Can we tell if underpayment penalty?
I don't think it's changed. I don't think any underpayment penalties, as far as I know, they haven't changed.
So that means everybody's utilizing safe
Oh, but
harbor.
I'm sorry. The one part that it's paid to interest, right? So it has I'm sorry, it has changed because it's paid to interest underpayment penalty is my understanding. So it's more expensive now to underpay.
Yeah, I think that is a factor.
Yeah, there's a bigger
Yeah.
deterrent to underpaying.
Yeah, because interest rates are higher, the penalty for underpaying is
So
higher. So that certainly is a
yeah,
factor.
people would not take a chance as much because the
Oh.
penalty is going to be bigger.
Oh, and there's another huge question mark that I forgot to mention that is really important. We pass this pass-through entity law, right? Are you guys familiar with this? So this was the law that allows people to pay their taxes, state taxes at the entity level. So at the S corps, and it's mainly S corps, but also partnership level, right?
Yeah.
And so in that way, you can claim your taxes against federal taxes to lower your taxes. What that does is that shifts all the declared estimated taxes from the individual income level to the corporate income. And the way we've done this is we said, you can try it, but if you're short, then you'll have to pay penalty and interest, right? And our department's having a very difficult time implementing this law. We're one of the last states to implement this law. So just about every other state has with the individual income tax. But every other state is having a nightmare trying to track revenues because of this, right? So,
Seth, could you describe that again?
right. So there was, if you can remember from the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, what they did is they put a ceiling on the state and local tax in deduction, right, of
Right.
$10,000,
Mhm.
right? So in high tax states, it affected the amount of federal deductions that you could claim if you're particularly if you're a high income earner, right? So places like New York and California devised these pass-through entity things that said you can file your taxes, your state taxes at the entity level, right? In which case you could you could actually deduct those taxes that you paid at the federal level. So that benefits you. Basically, the only people who are willing to do that are high income earners, right? Because like most other people don't have, it's not worth it. So what happens is now we've said, okay, you can do that, but you have to file all your taxes at the local level at the highest rate potential. So everybody has to pay 11% at the state, at the entity level, which is the S corp and partnership level. And then they can deduct that against their taxes later. So what that is actually for me, the revenue estimator officially, that has zero impact on our state taxes because they're just transferring stuff from the federal level to the local or from the individual, paying the taxes at the individual level and putting it at the corporate entity level. In practice, every single state has actually seen a slight increase in their taxes because they're claiming more and more state level taxes, and they're being charged at a slightly higher rate than they're always charged at the highest rate. Right. So it's super complicated. We don't
I hear
know.
it's very limited utility because you have to be in a really, really high bracket. Both both couples, because a married couple, even if they're like 500,000, they're still better off paying estimated than having the entity pay the 11%.
That's correct. However, and it is important to remember that we have a very progressive tax structure.
Yeah.
So people the high-end taxpayers actually they pay a lot of our taxes. So what these really high income people do have a big impact on us as well. So just to make your jobs a little bit easier.
Yeah, thank you,
Can you
Seth.
explain I don't know, it could be a factor in why estimated taxes went down too, because where would it be reported on the monthly report?
So if I did show you,
Because historically,
what you would do is you would transfer. Can you see my cursor?
yeah,
Yes,
Okay. So instead of paying the declared estimated taxes here, you would pay them up here at the corporate level.
and that's a little bit up. That's up about 30.
Yeah, and it's just starting. People are just starting to figure this out right now. I think my understanding is we are required them to pay both levels, and then they're going to get their refund at the individual income level once they've shown that they've done it at the entity level. But it's a nightmare, and we're still trying to figure things out. But if everybody starts taking advantage of this, we would expect lower declared estimated taxes at the individual level and higher at the corporate level going forward.
We've kind of spilled over into the topic on the current year's revenue estimate for 2024. Anyone want to start a discussion what they think should be the number? I guess one question I have, Dr. Kobe, do you remember why last general fund meeting was early September? Do you remember why we projected like, is it 1.3 growth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maui wildfire,
Okay.
US recession. Take your pick.
Those are the big factors.
Uncertainty.
And recovering.
So
go ahead. Sorry.
So I will start with a little bit of conversation about the changes that. So we released a forecast report soon after the wildfire, and it turns out, thankfully, it was way too pessimistic. I mean, the bounce back mostly in the labor market has been pretty astounding. I mean, the unemployment insurance claims on Maui peaked at about 8,800. This is continuing claims in, I think it was mid-September, so weekly data. And the last data point I looked at, I think was December 30. And about half of those people who were filing for claims in September are no longer filing for claims. So, I mean, and the only real reason to do that is that you found work. So none of them have run out of benefits yet, although that's coming. That's in the cards, and I think it's a 6-month window if it's not extended. But to have 4,000 people go back to work that fast was certainly surprised us. So I mean, the unemployment rate on Maui is I want to say less than 7, probably less than 6% right now.
How many of those people left?
Yeah.
Well, leaving doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but so if you left and found a job, you would stop filing. But if you left and don't have a job, you'd keep filing. And no one can tell you how many people left. The data, I mean, there is no data on how many. Yeah, you don't have to, punch a time clock when you get on the plane. I mean, we expect that the number of people to leave will be in the 3,000 or 4,000 person range. But I mean, you can also, so if you look at the statewide excess demand for workers that we can calculate from the job openings and labor turnover data, and you use that as a proxy for what was happening on Maui, so you get the result that there was 2.5% of labor force represented excess demand for workers. So total demand for workers exceeded the labor force by about 2.5% back in July. And if you do the math, that's close to 2,000 jobs. But that data doesn't distinguish between part-time jobs and full-time jobs. And so if all of, if that represents 2,000 full-time jobs and you fill it with 4,000 half-time jobs, then you completely, all those people found work. Doesn't mean they're whole, right? So, you lost your job as a bartender in Lahaina because your bar is gone, and now you're working 20 hours a week at Walmart, right? You're not whole. So it doesn't, but it's still a reflection, I think, of the fact that the Maui economy is a little stronger than we expected. And also those people are finding jobs working for the recovery process. They're working for the Red Cross, they're working for FEMA, they're working for nonprofits. They're helping with the cleanup. And so, and then the other thing is that the tourism recovery, if you will, is stronger than we thought it would be. Quite a bit stronger. When we were doing those forecasts, we didn't even know when the sort of reopening date was going to be. And I mean, if you look at the passenger count data for what it's worth, or you can look at the visitor data through November, it's quite a bit strong, and it represents several hundred million in visitor spending on Maui, more than what we thought was going to happen. And overall tourism in the state is, as of the end of the year, is stronger than we thought it would have been. Mostly because the Japanese finally surprised to the upside. We finally got 10,000 plus more Japanese visitors than we thought was going to happen. So we're in the November data, we're at about 50% of pre-pandemic levels for Japanese visitors, which is quite good.
Where is Maui in terms of what percentage have they recovered to? Is it about 80% or 75%?
Oh God, no, I don't know. Hold on, I'll tell you. So visitor arrivals, total visitor arrivals to Maui in November. It's at 793,000, and let's just say November. Oh my goodness. Let me take off the seasonal adjustment. It's probably getting confused. Actually, if you believe the data, oh, that's state, no wonder. Okay, never mind. Give me a second. So, visitor arrivals to Maui in November was 165,000, and November a year ago was 234,000. 165 divided by 234, that's 70%. So they're still down 30%, but that's significantly better than we thought.
And the trend is up, right? The trend isn't.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been growing ever since September. So the bottom line is, it won't surprise me if we're revising our forecast up. We're already working on it, actually, and I know we're revising our U.S. forecast up, as are most people. Hopefully, we're right. And I think our forecast for the U.S. economy had been 1.2%, and we're probably looking at more like 1.5, 1.6 now for 2024. And that's I don't know if that's above consensus. It's close. I think the Fed is at 1 point. Actually, I can't remember. A little bit over 1% year over year. So, I mean, actually, I updated my tax forecast that I do in my model when I got the December data point from Seth, and I'm getting a number of roughly 4% for the fiscal year now.
That seems pretty reasonable.
I think it's in the ballpark, but if you use the calculator, so when I use the calculator, I would probably adopt a number like 5% for all the months of the remaining months in the fiscal year, with the exception of April. And then the question is, how weak is April? And the 5% just comes from, our forecast of 2% real growth and 3% inflation, because the Honolulu inflation has ticked back up again.
What is it now?
I want to say 3.5% was the latest year-over-year numbers.
But on national level, it's been coming down, right? The inflation.
Yeah. Actually, if you look at the data, say for the last 6 months, the PCE deflator, actually, I don't know what the headline is. The core is sub 2%. The latest data point, the November data point for Honolulu, was 3.6%. Yeah, the November core inflation rate for Honolulu was 4.8. I'm sorry, that's right.
How are Christmas sales? Do we have some preliminary data on that?
I don't know.
It seemed as though from the visitor industry that December traffic was low. Looking at the passenger counts and just anecdotally talking to some people in the visitor industry, that it was they had capacity. There was a slow month. I don't know if other people have seen the same thing.
Yeah, Christy, I heard the same thing from all those that I know that are in the visitor industry or retail industry, especially in Waikiki. They were saying that things are slow in December.
Yeah, the total passenger count for December was up 1% year-over-year, and for the whole year it was up 6%. But then that's comparing everything to still bounce back from pandemic. Yeah, actually, the U.S. visitor numbers, I think, were weaker in Q4. If I were to, we don't have full quarter data, but using the passenger count, so we run a model that forecasts visitors for the month based on passenger counts and seats outlook, and so those numbers for U.S. were down, but Japanese was up. So you kind of ended up. So actually, for the whole quarter, I think we would estimate that total visitor arrivals were probably down 2% in the fourth quarter compared to a year earlier.
And spending was down. Was that December or was that November?
No, that would have been November data, right? We don't have the December data yet. And
which is surprising.
Yeah, total visitor spend. I think that's partly tied up with Maui, right? The visitor spending fell in August 9% year over year, and it was still down in September 9% year over year, and October and November it's down 2 to 2.5% year over year. And with the cost of a hotel room on Maui, those are high spending vacations, right? If I remember right, I think Maui makes up about 1/3 of visitor spending to the state.
Wow. So even though the tourist is about half of that, the spending is actually almost 1/3 of the state.
Yeah.
It's 30-something percent.
Yeah.
But in terms of people, it's isn't it about?
It's quite a bit lower than that. I think it's close to 15%.
Okay. But they have
just
high, very
as
high
much.
rates, a lot of high-end restaurants.
Well, I think, Carl, I think you're absolutely right that what happens in April is the big unknown. We've had some record, just crazy Aprils, and maybe people have their tax situation under better control so that they don't have to make large payments come April, but we've got that outside April number, and then we have to remember the 311 that we didn't have this year that caused the year-to-date number to be higher than it otherwise would be. If we subtract out that 311, we're actually flat to slightly down on our tax collections year over year.
So you're saying we need to remember that because so that we don't get too excited about the rest of the year, or 'cause
Right,
it's already
so
in the
that-
data, right?
Yeah, I mean, 7.3% sounds really good, but most of that is due to that the tax refund. So it's not as though
So
the economy is doing 7.3% better.
So it raises the question of whether, what you would assume for the remaining months in terms of a growth rate, right? You certainly wouldn't want to adopt 7, and maybe even 5 is too high.
Yeah, and especially, let's see, December was kind of month over month, it was only 2.3%. We saw visitor spending a little bit lower in November. So of course, I'm always cautious, but I don't think we should expect to have this huge increase in April. So I feel pretty comfortable with a 4% number, which is substantially higher than where we were last time.
Well said, Christy.
Quick question. I know we saw the CPI number for November go up to 3.6% for inflation. Do you think that's a continual trend, or do you think that's just a blip in the pie, so to speak?
If I remember right, in our last forecast report, we raised our forecast for calendar year 24 to, I think, 3%. My recollection was that the source for that increase was actually shelter. It was the homeowner's equivalent rent component, which was a little surprising. But, our rents haven't followed the same kind of pattern that the national. I mean, we didn't see rents grow as fast, and we didn't see them come down as fast. Actually, I don't see that as the problem. Oh, I see. Inflation less shelter. So if you take shelter out, inflation in November was only 1.7%.
Interesting.
And actually, nationally, shelter has been pulling. It's been one of the forces that have. Yeah, it was a big jump from year over year in October. Rent of primary resident was 3.8%. In November was 8.8%.
Wow.
So I wouldn't read too much into it. I mean, it's kind of surprising.
Yeah, the shelter portion of the CPI is an interesting calculation.
Yeah, well, it is, but at the same time, I don't see, we don't, unlike nationally, where the expectation is that shelter component, or the rent of primary residence and rental component in general is expected to continue to come down, because we know asking rents have come down a lot, right? And where, in contrast, in Hawaii, asking rents have really stabilized and even gone up a little bit. And so we're kind of bucking the trend a little bit. And of course, we didn't build thousands and thousands and thousands of multifamily units over the last year. It's helping to pull down rents.
Councilmember Lee,
Because of
do you have
Maui?
any thought? Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Masu.
Sorry about that. I was just thinking, all those rental units that are on Maui that are charging maybe higher than they should, would that inordinately swing the housing component up higher, so resulting in a higher percentage or higher CPI? I mean, you're saying that the
You
concentration.
know, that's so that's not in the data yet, right? So I think what you're talking about is so if you look at like data from Zillow or other high frequency data on rents, you know, so we scrape rent data from Craigslist and for all the islands, but you know, for the neighbor islands, the samples are really small and they're pretty volatile. And so, you know, we've seen a little bit of move in that data, a little bit of increase in rents, not like what you've heard, you know, anecdotally. But that wouldn't, you know, that's not showing up in the CPI yet. But you could imagine that and remember the CPI is Honolulu. So it actually won't show up ever.
Right.
I think that's right. I don't think they call it urban Honolulu, but I don't think they're including Wailuku in that calculation. If they were, then I think your hypothesis, Mike, is correct, right? If you suddenly start renting to residents at visitor rates, right, then yeah, that would represent a jump in rents that would boost that number. Something to look into.
Because the CPI says it's urban Hawaii, so is
Yeah.
Lahaina considered urban?
I don't think so.
It's
I'm
weird.
not even sure that Wailuku is in, right, the MSA, the Kahului Wailuku. I'm not even sure that's in the urban Hawaii. I think for some reason they've renamed it urban Hawaii, but I'm pretty sure it's still Honolulu.
Yeah, the reason they do that is for the military. It's basically for military spending and to adjust for cost of living adjustments. So given that nearly all the bases are in Oahu, that's basically what they focus on.
Councilmember Lee, do you have any comments about?
No, I'm good.
Councilmember Hayashi?
No, I mean, I think what Christy was saying makes sense because, you know, inputting, if we were to say the rest of the year is flat, then the total growth rate for the year is 3.3, and a 1.2% increase for each of the months, you know, even including April, we're at 4%, which seems extremely modest. So, yeah, I mean, it would seem that it's our kind of our mean forecast may be a little low.
Well, should I make a motion? I'll make a motion to change our forecast to 4%.
Oh, do you want to change it, Christy?
Rather than,
So Christy, you are free to make a motion if you would like.
do you feel that that's too high, Kurt?
Well, what were you thinking?
Well, we're right now, we're at 1.3, right?
Yeah.
So that would imply negative growth for the rest of the year. And if we just put in and make sure I'm reading this correctly, if we estimate that it's at like 1% for the rest of the year, we'd be around 4%.
Yeah.
Let me put the numbers in. So
I think that comes out to 3.9.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if it was flat, it was, as Scott was saying, it was 3.3. If people feel more comfortable with that, I'd happy to change my motion.
So your motion's at 4 at this point.
Motion at 4.
Councilmember Ostergaard Klein, do you have any comments?
No, I'm just listening and following along, and I see, Christy, yes, where you put it flat at 1%, then it's 3.9. So I think that's pretty close to 4 based on my limited experience with the model, but thank you all I'm just kind of like soaking it in at this point.
I would second that.
Mhm.
Member Hamasi, do you have any comments?
I'm in agreement with that.
Okay. Is someone willing to second the motion, Christie's motion?
I'll second Wendell.
Okay, so there's a motion now on the floor for the current year general fund growth rate of 4%. Vice Chair Maynard,
Well, I would like to get Carl's feedback.
Oh, okay, more discussion.
You know, it's the difference between 2% and 4% is a lot of money, but it's also completely inside our confidence intervals on this mess that we're dealing with, because April is just going to have such an outsized effect. And I guess on the positive side, I think there's reason to think that we're going to continue to see revenue improvement as Maui continues on its recovery path. Right. I don't think we've been affected through December by September, October, November, December collections being down associated with Maui, and I think those are going to continue to improve. So I mean, I'm comfortable with 4. But then I would be comfortable with 2, 3, or 4. When I ran, so my forecast that I submitted back in December was 2.7, and when I ran it today with the new December data point, I got 4.4. And that's a pretty, I mean, there were other updates. I also updated jobs data and visitor data and stuff like that. But so I guess the bottom line is I'm comfortable with 4.
We haven't really seen December's activity, right, in the general fund yet, because that gets reported. Yeah, and that picks up all the holiday sales. I mean, a lot of December sales, as well as after Christmas sales, as well as the tourism from December.
Yeah, let's cross our fingers for a strong.
Yeah, so we have 2
January collections.
April is traditionally the April period has been big, or sometimes it's in May, and then also January tends to be very big.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm second guessing myself if Carl thinks I'm too high. That almost never happens, Carl.
I mean, I'll vote for 4%. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, Vice Chair Maynard.
Hi.
Dr. Bonham.
Aye.
Council Member Hayashi.
Aye.
Council Member Lee.
Aye.
Council Member Asagad Clem.
Aye.
Council Member Hamasu.
Aye.
Okay. So the vote carries unanimously. The general fund estimate for the current fiscal year will be 4%. Moving on to the next fiscal year 2025. Anyone want to lead us off? Dr. Bonham, you normally start us off.
I don't see anything wrong with our current forecast.
We're currently at
5.6, I believe. So you need to keep in mind that the spending on rebuilding is really, so depending on who you listen to, the conversations about when the cleanup will be, or when the debris removal will be finished in Lahaina. I mean, I've actually had people tell me 6 months, which I didn't believe. That was kind of shocking. I've also, latest I've heard, I can't remember if it was from what the source was. It was an official source quoted by the news, was 12 months, right? And so you think about rebuilding really starting in 2025 and 2026 calendar years. While the debris removal is a huge effort and will show up in excise tax collections and job growth and other things. So there's, in our forecast, we have GDP growth sort of above pre-fire growth rates, certainly in 2025 and 2026. And I suspect that when we update our forecast, we'll also be above that in 2024. So we're going to get this growth that you normally see after a natural disaster as you go through the process of rebuilding. So I think our forecast right now is 5.6, 3.9, or 3.7.
I have it as 5.2. and then
5.2.
3.5.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my forecast.
Dr. Bynum,
5.2, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5,
Right.
right?
what's the latest consensus on any kind of potential recession? You don't see it?
I mean, the consensus now is soft landing, which is why you should be worried. And I mean, some, and some people are starting to think about no landing. I mean, the bottom line is that basically for the last 2 years, the U.S. economy is surprised to the upside, all the way up to the December jobs. Right? It's like every month. Well, maybe not every month. Every month you get noise, and then annually and quarterly you see the economy performing. So, like I mentioned earlier, I think we're probably going to raise our U.S. GDP forecast from 1.2 to 1.5 or 1.6% for 2024. There's plenty of things to worry about. Particularly January 20th is something to be concerned about, the possibility of a shutdown. There's the possibility of maybe even the likelihood of sequestration starting in April. So, obviously there's geopolitical events and all of those come in play, but the economy just kind of keeps chugging along.
I think given that we raised this year's forecast, perhaps it makes sense to lower what because we're gonna have a higher jumping off point, yeah.
Well, except that, I mean, I guess we should have already built in the Maui rebuilding in our last forecast. Whether or not we did is a whole nother question.
Yeah.
And we certainly didn't have in our last forecast a sort of stronger recovery than expected.
Because we're increasing the current fiscal year 2.7%. So the base goes up 2.7 for the next year.
Right, but remember that's because we were wrong.
Yeah, but if we were right on the forecast for the next fiscal year, I kind of, unless there's something pushing it higher, I would think we'd have to make an adjustment.
Yeah, I don't really follow.
I mean, we're increasing the base 2.7%.
No, I mean, I understand what's
So I mean,
going on up here, but I'm not sure that.
So in other words, you're saying then we should have increased next year almost 2.7 plus 5.2.
Well, look, if the economy grows at 5%, it grows at 5%, and it doesn't really. The economy doesn't care what last year's base was. If we add 2% to nominal income and 3% to inflation, we get 5% growth. I mean, I understand that it's harder to get 2% real income growth when, if you've had a banner year the year before, but it certainly happens.
The reason, if you want to adjust fiscal year 2025 because you've increased fiscal year 2024, it's because you're pulling some of the growth from 2025 and putting it in 2024, but you're not seeing overall growth thing. So if that's your view, that's what you should do. But I don't think what you guys have been explaining is, unless you think that we've pulled the Maui recovery forward so much that that's the change, that would be the only reason why you'd have to adjust that down, right?
Because what we're doing basically is we're going to say off of our current forecast, 2025 would grow about 8% from our forecast.
Oh.
And normally, historically, when we increase like either the current or the next year, we do consider quite often adjusting downward the following year. That's usually our normal course.
For some of us,
2.7% increase. It's not like a half of 1 point.
I mean, I can tell you that when we work on our forecasts, which we adjust, we update every quarter. When we raise the we raised the forecast for 2024 because we thought we got it wrong so far. We don't then lower the forecast for 2025, right? It's not. It
I mean,
doesn't
usually-
make any sense.
I'm speaking about the council. Usually we make an
I
adjustment.
know.
Yeah.
It's the same math.
Well, I think if we're assuming that Maui's came back stronger, which we are assuming, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't see as much of a jump in the next year because we're seeing strong growth this year.
Because we're about 70%. We didn't expect to be 70%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my
Yeah.
thinking. Anyway,
I guess I wanted
Yeah,
to hear in regards to 2025. I guess with the anticipation that interest rates are going to be declining in the second half of the year, from a real estate perspective, we're looking at much more investment, much more development happening going forward. So when I put forward my forecast, I anticipated 2020 or fiscal year 2025 to be fairly strong as a result of that. Now, Maui, yeah, I can see development. It's going to take years. I don't see any significant change in the outlook other than construction and development will happen in Lahaina only because of, unfortunately, the fires. But in terms of statewide activity, I think just from my perspective, that 2025 is much more optimistic should the interest rates go down and all the capital that's sitting on the sidelines decides to be deployed at that point. So that's my perspective. I don't profess to know everything regarding how everything is going to be impacted, but that's just where I'm coming from.
What is going to push interest rates down? Is it going to be lower inflation or?
Yes.
So they expect it.
I mean, you think 7% on the PCE deflator to 2%. That's a big swing. And the Fed has to start lowering rates because if they don't, they're tightening. And the last thing they want to do is have a hard landing, right? They look really good right now, but all they have to do is leave interest rates alone and have the tightening happen because inflation has come down, right? Real rates going up. And the first sign of a couple of months of weaker job numbers, I think they're going to be pretty fast. And then on top of that deployment of capital that Mike was talking about, I think there's a pretty good chance that once the Fed cuts rates and the market goes nuts, right, overreacts, drives rates down even more, and the Bank of Japan finally raises rates because their inflation is more entrenched than they've been willing to admit, there's a decent chance that we could see a 10% swing in the yen. I mean, it's not uncommon for currencies to move that much in a very short period of time.
Oh, it could be
Maybe,
bigger.
maybe I'm overstating it, but it's certainly possible. Yeah, there's a lot of tailwind from the falling interest rates, I think.
Mike and Carl, just curious with regard to the comment about with the interest rates going down, development increasing, I would agree, but are we still going to be constrained by resources? Because I've been hearing that, labor, obviously, it's happened in the past where all the construction labor goes to the mainland because they're building, they can get better rates there. I know there's still my understanding is there's still a concrete shortage for Portland cement. So, there's problems there as far as certain supplies. Have you heard, is that going to continue on, or you think that supply chains will go back to normal and we'll be able to kind of develop as need be and construct as need be?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. In regards to supply chain shortages and labor shortages, I think that's going to be continual. I don't think it's going to change much. I think what we're seeing is I guess development or developers and contractors are all going over to Maui to try to capitalize on on the unfortunate task of developing or redeveloping the area, but yeah, supply chains, unless Matson decides to bring additional ships here with construction materials, I don't think, I think pricing is gonna escalate a lot faster, maybe reflected in inflation as well, resulting in kind of like maybe a dampening of development. But I think interest rates will have a bigger of an impact on moving forward in terms of perspective, because that's financing for development, and then we'll leave it up to the contractors to figure out how to bring in their goods at a cheaper rate. But that's, you know, that's an excellent point. I mean, I think you know, maybe instead of a double-digit increase in GDP or GSP, we'd maybe see a very high percentage growth, but it's held back by labor shortages and by construction material pricing.
That's consistent with what I've heard from builders and developers, is that in most, if you talk to any of the major developers or construction firms, they'll tell you that the supply chains are still a little constrained, right? I mean, they basically, there's a longer window for everything still. But it's, you know, it's not like they just flat out can't get garage doors. And so therefore you can't finish a house. So therefore it just sits there empty. And then the other thing is, so yeah, I agree. I think Mike's probably right, is that we will see some projects that were in the planning stages that will get put on hold, right? Because of rising labor costs, or you can't find a sub. But at the same time, there's a coming end to the multifamily housing boom that hit the mainland. And those workers are going to start looking for new work. And I think there's a chance that we will be able to bring in labor for some of these bigger projects. It's not optimal, but I think it's possible. It'll still tend to drive up costs. And then the other thing is, I mean, if we get our forecast right now is for a 30-year mortgage rate at 6.5% by the end of the year. And it wouldn't surprise me if we get a little bit below that. I think if we get to 6.5, that's enough to unleash some of the demand. And I don't know about the supply. I don't know whether the inventories will improve very much, but we start to get some improvement in home resales, and that'll have an impact on the overall economy and on tax collections.
That's still a high rate though, 6.5, you know, relative to where we were.
Well, we aren't going back to 2, so
Yeah.
or 2.5, right? 6.5 is not high historically. It's
But it's
I don't know
high.
what the average
This
is.
is the last, what, 8 years or so? It's a very high.
But we've
rate.
seen this. We've seen this multiple times as as rates have bounced around when they shot up. When you add 300-400 basis points to a mortgage rate over the course of a year, everybody disappears, and then they come down 50 to 100 basis points, and people start jumping in. And if we stabilize at 6.5, I think it'll make a big difference.
But the costs are rising too, right? With the supply.
Sure.
Supply side, yeah.
But one thing, whether it's, even if you have restricted suppliers and builders, what you're doing is you're either bidding up labor and you're building up materials, which is a net positive for tax receipts. It's not net positive for real value that you're getting. But from what you guys are forecasting and nominal values, it's not that big of a problem.
Yeah.
Could we talk a little bit about?
Benefits by that.
Oh, go ahead. Councilmember
Sorry.
Austin had a point.
Sorry, Kurt. Could we talk a little bit about labor and wages anyway, just in general with the, because following on what you're saying, Seth, and then also because in general for the US, we're expecting inflation to come down, but the story was inflation's been rising, but wages are lagging in terms of, people can't afford things, so what's the general term? Maybe Carl, can talk about that, the US versus what's happening in Hawaii in terms of the reaction of income and wages to inflation. And if inflation is supposed to kind of ease off a little bit, then how is that what will be the follow-up from that?
Yeah, I mean, that decline in inflation that we've seen nationally has resulted in wages actually growing in real terms, right? And so, while it's true that prices aren't falling, right, and that's what makes people angry still about inflation. And people always discount, right? When they see wage growth, they think it's because they're great workers, and they don't recognize that some of that is just because of past inflation movements. And so they don't attribute that to policy, they attribute that to themselves. And but wages are going up faster than inflation right now, even in Hawaii, even with that 3% number. And yeah, so I mean, so we're not, if you look at total real income and you take out all the transfer, I mean, with all the transfer payments that happened in 2021, 2022, we're not back at that level for, say, total real income, but we're above 2019 levels, I think. And our forecast is for real income to grow by about 2% a year for the next several years. Of course, that's an average, right? I mean, that's total, and obviously it matters a lot where you are in the income distribution, and whether you're seeing those kinds of wage gains. And a lot of those wage gains were for job changers, right? For people who were moving between jobs, and the people who stayed put didn't see anywhere near the same kind of wage increases. So there's a lot of heterogeneity and a lot of room for some people not to feel that great. I don't know if that was getting at the question you were asking.
And I mean, I'm just throwing it out there because that's something in addition that we need to think about if we're talking about, what the estimate is for 2025, and that wages will increase due to construction demands, or does that have any impact, not just inflation, but all the things on wages that we haven't considered up till now in our previous 2025 forecast?
So I think our forecast is 5.2. I mean, in my mind, that's fine. Christy probably wants to make a motion.
I'm scared. I would actually prefer a lower number. It just seems it seems a little optimistic to me to be going up that high, given that we are, and I understand what you're saying, that the growth in the economy builds on whatever we have now. But it does feel like a little bit too high based on.
About 5%.
How about 4.5? That way it's, because we've got, really in my mind, I was thinking more about Maui. It has come back stronger than we anticipated. Looking at I'm looking at the daily flight numbers and really surprised at how those have come back. Of course, that's not all visitors. Some of that are people going out to help in other ways, but I think that rebound was faster, and perhaps should lower next year because of that. We won't have another increase in Maui visitors that would be equal to that.
I have a very basic question. When you say that the forecast is 5 point something %, I'm looking at all these different models that are sent to me. There's the model 1 multiple equation, model 3 single equation, and all these other ones. Am I supposed to be looking at one sheet in particular? Is it table 6AA or?
Well, table 5A is the current forecast.
It is confusing.
Which,
Page 7.
oh, so it's in your document.
It's in the buckets. Yeah.
Okay.
The booklet, Councilmember Masu.
Okay, then that would be the booklet. Okay.
So Christy, I mean, obviously in my way I'm thinking about things, there's no difference between 4.5 and 5.2. So I would be certainly not within our ability to make any distinctions. It's just a matter of comfort levels.
Mhm.
And I'm comfortable with either one.
How does everyone else feel about 4.5?
Councilmember Lee, you have any thoughts?
I feel like it's 5, just because from the sense of, if we look at the models and we look at our input, we're generally higher. And so, you know, do we rely on the model data, which is kind of varied in itself, and stick with what we originally have, 5, you know, 5.2, 5, or whatever it may be. I just have my sense that it just seems interest rates are going to drive the changes, and with sales, the economy, the stock market, and it has to drop. And I think it's going to drop shortly unless there's some other catastrophic event. So I don't know. I'm just tending. I just kind of feel like the model that we had at the 5.2, I was comfortable with that.
Because we had 3.6 and 2.3, right? For the models for the current fiscal year. So
Right.
yeah. But at the same time, the first model shows 7.7 for
Right.
next fiscal year. Yeah.
That's why I was comfortable with the 5.
Councilmember Hayashi, you have any thoughts, comments?
No, not really. I mean, I think I'm comfortable with either one. Yeah, similar to Carl's point. I mean, the difference between the two, between 4.5 and 5.2, I mean, in total, running it through the model is, you know, it's like maybe 50 some odd million, is what I'm looking at. And yeah, Lord knows we've been much farther off than that. So I think either one, yeah, I'm fine with 4.5.
Whatever happens in April is going to swamp this entire
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
We increased the
One
current,
way or the other.
we increased the current fiscal year from 1.3 to 4, right? So it's about almost 2.5. It's almost $250 million for the current year. We increased it. So we're gonna have
It
that
is a quarter of
increase.
it is a quarter of a billion.
Yeah.
So that's a big, yeah, that's a big number. I will officially then make a motion for 4.5%.
I
For
wanted to
next year?
for the last two council members input first, if it's
Oh,
okay.
sure.
Councilmember Ostergaard, Clint.
Sure. So I think I'm okay with the 4.5. I think when I originally looked doing my survey, I came out a little bit higher than that, but but I'm perfectly fine with that, especially given the uncertainty with April and lots of other things too. So I'm okay with it.
How did you come out for the current fiscal year? Was it above 4 or 4?
It was for the current first fiscal year. I was a little, depending on which model, 1 or 3, you mean?
You said you came out higher for the current, for fiscal year 2025, but I was asking, how did you come out for the current fiscal year?
A little
So-
bit higher too, maybe. So, yeah.
Okay, a bit higher than 4 too.
Yeah, so I'm fine with 4.5. Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Hamasu, any thoughts and comments?
I realize there's a lot of gray area here, but I guess I'm a little more optimistic. I think 4.75 to 5 might be a little more favorable for what I think we'll be at, but you know, I'd be a dissenter amongst the consensus, I guess, here.
I'm more with you, Mike.
I think you're right.
4.75.
We could split
That'd be
the
a nice.
difference.
That'd be a good.
Compromise.
I think we're more likely to underestimate overall economic growth in fiscal 25, fiscal 26, fiscal 27 because of the rebuilding on Maui. I think we're going to be surprised to the upside, along with the declining interest rates, assuming we have a soft landing.
Yeah, assuming we have a soft landing, right? No recession in
How
2020.
long Carl, how long do you think it will take before rebuilding can actually start?
Well, I think you'll actually see some rebuilding in 2024. Limited, right? Very limited. And the more activity. So you'll probably see some infrastructure later in the year, right? Late in 2024. And some buildings, you'll begin to see activity late in 2024, and then most of it will really start to ramp up in 25 and go on multiple years, right?
Yeah, I'm more optimistic later.
Sure.
Because I
Yeah,
think
but
it's
that's
gonna
what we're
take a
talking
long
about.
time.
Right. We're talking
before-
about fiscal 2025. So
Yeah, I think it's just,
that's the first half of 2025 might be the bounce.
it takes so long to get anything approved, to get done in Maui and other places, not just Maui.
Yeah.
I can tell you that there are some projects that are already kicking off because there's an emergency school that's being put in place right now already. So there is some infrastructure, as Carl said, that is going in immediately. And my understanding of the plan is that it's going to be phased, right? There's going to be certain stuff, that for temporary, not temporary housing, but shorter term, that they're going to be looking to build quickly to get some people into those kind of units, and then looking, as they go long term, it's going to take longer and longer. So, and the rebuild of individual houses, it could be years in the making. But my understanding is, it is going to be kind of a phased approach as far as all the construction goes in Maui. So.
I just happened to run across the RFP from Maui County asking for infrastructure assistance. So I know that that's actually already on the agenda going forward.
I think they awarded that, didn't they? Or is it still outstanding?
I don't know.
I had heard that they had just contracted with a big company that I thought would be helping them with planning for infrastructure, but could be something different. So where are we? 5?
Christie, you had your motion at 4.5. Do you want to keep it at 4.5 or you?
How about we compromise at 475? Would people be okay with
475%?
4.75? Mr. Smart Aleck.
This is one
Strike
meeting.
that from the minutes. Strike that.
7.5. Did we ever go to 1.7 in quarters before? But nothing that says we can't do quarters.
We have, I think.
We've done tenths.
I just don't remember it. But 4.75, any discussion at 4.75?
We rounded to 4.8.
Anybody going up to 5?
I'll second that.
Okay, 4.75. Okay, Councilmember, I'm sorry, Vice Chair Maynard,
Yes.
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
sorry, Councilmember Hayashi. You're
Yes.
priority.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Councilmember Lee,
Yes.
Councilmember Asagard Clem,
Yes.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Yes.
Okay,
Reluctantly.
it carries unanimously, although I think I heard some push for 5 at the end. Okay, next item on the agenda is the following 5 fiscal years. Fiscal year 26 to 20, I'm sorry, 20, the following 4 fiscal years.
26, 27, 28, 29.
2030. So fiscal year 2026 to 30.
Yeah.
Currently we're at 3.5% for all 4 fiscal years. Dr. Bonham, you want to lead our discussion? You seem to think 26.
I just don't think 2026 is likely to be as weak as 3.5%. But in other words, I think we're still going to be in the sort of perceived boom period in terms of rebuilding during 2026. I guess I would be comfortable with, say, 4.5% or 4% for 2026, and then leave the out years the same or unchanged at 3.5.
So just to make sure, you're looking at 4 or 4.5% for fiscal 26 and leaving the out years The years, the last 4 years the same.
Yeah, 3.5.
Any discussion? Councilmember Hamasu, you seem to think that we're gonna see somewhat of a boom, right, with lowering interest rates?
Well, I mean, I read the same language and all the other reports that you guys read, so I guess I'm a little more optimistic. I'd probably say if fiscal year 25 is 4.75, then fiscal 26 would be 4.5, and then, you know, I don't mind it steadily decreasing back to 3.5 or 3% by 2030. Yes, it's just the strength. I just anticipate, maybe more optimistically, that there's going to be a lot more strength headed into the next couple of years, hopefully with interest rates declining, residential home purchases hopefully start picking up again, and then development starts to pick up. So those are the factors I'm looking at as hopefully to fuel some of the economic growth going forward. But you know, that's just my limited perspective at this time.
No, we appreciate your perspective. Yeah. That would be great to see
Vice
more
Chair,
economic
do you have
growth.
any thoughts about the fiscal 26 to 2030? Vice Chair,
I'm
Oh.
sorry.
oh, did you have any thoughts about?
No,
What's your
I-
motion, Christie?
I appreciate the optimism, in looking at construction. I hope that it comes true. And I wouldn't mind, you know, as you say, maybe going 4.5, 3.5, if that's kind of what you're thinking, Mike.
I
So
think,
Christie,
like you said, maybe 4.5, 26, 4.
I'm not making any more motions, by the way.
you know, you have to have a hat trick.
You gotta start
You need a hat
somewhere.
trick for today. All 3 motions for you.
As the vice chair, I bow to your experience in the council, so I'm only expressing the perception that my background's more real estate, so that's the only one.
No, but that's a big part of what we're thinking about, and I think construction will have a big impact on the economy as a whole.
So,
So Christie, what
Yeah,
was
I
the last
will.
one? Did you say 4.5 down to 4, then 3.5 for the rest?
I'll move that.
So
Someone else can second.
I'll second that.
so who did the motion? I'm sorry.
Carl did.
Carl,
Christie.
The motion, and then it was seconded by Wendell. Okay, so the vote on the floor, any more discussion? The vote that's being proposed is fiscal year 2026 will be 4.5, fiscal year 2027 will be 4, fiscal year 28 through 30 will be 3.5. Any discussion, any further discussion on that? Okay.
any potential for a recession out there, Carl?
no,
I
Oh, sure.
brought it up several times about
Always.
potential hard landings.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, if no further discussion, we'll take a vote. Vice Chair Maynard,
Yes,
Dr. Bonham,
Yes.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Yes.
Councilmember Lee,
yes,
Councilmember Asagard Klim,
Aye, yes.
and Councilmember Hamasu.
Yes,
I'm sorry, yes.
yes.
So the vote carries unanimously. So for the last 5 years, fiscal year 26 will be 4.5% growth rate is what the council has estimated. Fiscal year 2027 will be 4%. And the final 3 fiscal years, 2028 through 2030, will be 3.5%. So that vote carried unanimously, as the prior 2 votes were also unanimous. Okay, Dr. Kopi, I had forgotten that we did get correspondence, right? But it related to, I think, something for the homelands, right? Or the
Yeah, it's for the Hawaiian homelands. It was really specific, and it just asked you to declare all the property that was under the purview of the Council on Revenues, which is 0.
Yeah, because we're just
You don't-
general fund, right?
Yeah, you don't have any properties.
Okay, so was that, did someone send a response to that? Or,
Nope. But it asks you to, we can look into that.
yeah, if we could do, at least close the loop, have some kind of formal
Mhm,
closure.
mhm, mhm.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda will be, I believe it's the special funds, right? Report by, the Department of Budget and Finance and other revenues. Mr.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the council. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
My name is Donovan Chun. I am with the Department of Budget and Finance. We have provided you our report of revised projections of general fund non-tax revenues, non-general fund tax and non-tax revenues since the September 7th meeting. The revenue estimates were prepared by departments in November and were based on point-in-time assumptions made by programs and department staff. Our report includes a summary of the significant changes. I will highlight 3 of the larger ones. Hang on, let me share a screen with you. On table 4A, under special fund non-tax revenues, in fiscal year 24, there's a net increase in transfers. It was a transfer of general funds to the Emergency and Budget Reserve Fund. That's pursuant to Act 164, Session Laws of Hawaii 2023. And Section 6 of Article 7 of the Hawaii State Constitution. That was
What line is
500.
that, Donovan?
It's this line right here.
Okay, thank you.
It was a transfer of 500 million from general funds into the Emergency Budget Reserve Fund. And then on table 5A, under federal grants, so that would be right here. The net increases in fiscal years 24 through 30 primarily reflect FEMA grants for public assistance, and that's related to the wildfires, and that went to the Department of Defense. It's $250 million a year. And then under transfers, in fiscal year 24, the net increase reflects a transfer of general funds into the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. That was appropriated in Act 236, Session Laws of Hawaii 2022. And that went to the Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation to be
How
used
large
for
was that? 300
million. And that was to be used for rental housing projects that get funded out of the Rental Housing Revolving Fund. And that's all I had to point out. Any questions?
Mr. Chen, do we have an idea how much money has come in from the federal government so far to help with the Maui?
I do
fires?
not have that specific number. I can try and get something for you and reply later.
Okay.
Donovan, just curious, so looking at the federal line here for 2023, it dropped by 1.3 billion. Is that then just being spread out over subsequent years? Is that the thinking?
I believe there was partially that. So in 23, there are a lot of projections. So for example, for 24 through 30, it's $250 million a year. What actually comes in is a lot of it, especially for FEMA, is on a reimbursement. So as we expend funds out of the state's funds, the federal government will reimburse. But there is a time lag, yeah. But
Mm.
there is a commitment from the feds to assist the state in that area, yeah.
Thank you.
Any further discussions? Any more questions on Mr. Chung? Any motion to approve the report?
So moved.
Second, in second,
I'll
Second,
sec-
second will be Councilmember Lee. Okay, we're gonna take a vote on to approve the report from BNF, Vice Chair Maynard,
Aye.
Dr. Bonham.
Aye.
Councilmember Hayashi,
Aye.
Councilmember Lee,
aye.
Councilmember Astagat Clem,
Aye.
Councilmember Hamasu.
Aye.
So the report is approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Chan. And when he responds, Dr. Kobe, could you forward the response to the council members?
For the thing from the
How much
Department of
money
Hawaii and Homeland.
Outside?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the final agenda item is setting the next meeting, which will be March. Let's see. Do you know when the House crossover is for the budget?
I don't off the top of the
When is our report due? Is it
your
March?
report due is March 15th. So my
March.
recommendation, if you guys do it March 12th, which is a Tuesday, we can have everything done by that date.
How is everyone on the council for March 12th at 2 p.m.?
I'm good.
Available.
Actually,
Works for me.
I teach a class from 2 to 3:30 on Tuesdays.
On Tuesdays?
Yeah,
I-
I have a conflict
to back.
also.
Yeah,
Okay.
but Mondays work for me. This same time on Mondays works for me.
How is everyone on March 11th at 2 p.m.?
Good with me.
I can make that work.
I can do it.
Okay. Councilmember Hamasu?
I'm available.
This is a general fund meeting, right?
Yeah, general fund. Is everyone good for March 11th at 2 p.m.?
Yep.
Okay, so the next meeting will be March 11th, Monday, March 11th at 2 p.m. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for the meeting today and Happy New Year. And instead you're gonna get Vice Chair Maynard and I the report, right? So we can, what's the deadline on this report?
The 10th.
Okay, so we
Plenty of time.
got it out by Wednesday then,
Mhm.
preferably maybe even tomorrow if we can.
Yeah, we'll have it out to you either tonight or tomorrow morning.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay,
you.
thank you, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
And Dr. Kobe, you send me, there's two things, right? Like we'll do a closing letter for that letter that came to us about the Hawaiian, is it the Hawaiian homelands or the CDN lands? I forgot what it was.
Whatever
Yeah.
it was for, we'll send it to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then also if Donovan gives us any information on how much money is coming in from FEMA.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.